To answer your direct question, we have a deal. And I think it's really important. We've all agreed that none of us got all that we wanted. I clearly didn't get all I wanted. They gave more than I think maybe they were inclined to give in the first place. But this reminds me of the days we used to get an awful lot done up in the United States Congress. We actually worked with one another. We had bipartisan deals. Bipartisan deals mean compromise.
All right, that was President Joe Biden flexing his political muscles on Thursday with the announcement of a bipartisan infrastructure package totaling $1.25 trillion if continued over 8 years. The package includes $400 billion for baseline transportation funding, $266 billion for water systems, broadband, and improving power grids. But then, just 2 hours later, Biden pulled a bait and switch. Watch this.
I expect that in the coming months this summer, before the fiscal year is over, that we will have voted on this bill, as well as the infrastructure bill, as well as voted on the budget resolution. And that's when, but if only one comes to me, this is the only thing that comes, I'm not signing it. It's intended.
He's not going to sign it unless he has a second bill side by side. Wyoming Senator John Barrasso is here. He is the third-ranking member in the Senate Republican leadership. He also sits on the Senate Finance and Foreign Relations Committees, and it is good to see you this morning, Senator. Thanks very much for being here. Will you vote yes for that second $5 trillion bill, which includes tax increases?
No, I will not. And thanks for letting me join you from Wyoming. Look, I'm a doctor, and I will tell you, you can get whiplash by trying to follow Joe Biden on this. So take a look at what happened. First, he agrees with a bipartisan bill focused on real infrastructure, and within 2 hours, he buckles to Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, who say not so fast. Unless this is handcuffed to this massive tax and spending bill, we're not going to send it to the White House. So he said, well, OK, well, I won't sign it if it's not tied together. Well, then you had outrage by the folks who were in the bipartisan group working with the president. And then what happens? Well, 2 days later, he flip-flops again. I mean, he's like a weather vane going to whoever the loudest voice is at the time.
So what do you think happened then, Senator? Do you think after he left the group that he had the handshakes and all the camaraderie with, he gets a call from Pelosi and says, don't do it? I mean, what happened?
That's exactly what I believe has happened, that the White House staff and Schumer and Pelosi, who are beholden to the far left wing of the Democrat Party, said, we're not going to go for this bipartisan bill. And look, this bipartisan bill itself is not yet completely settled. There are a number of Republicans, and I'm one of them, who's not completely sold on it. I want to make sure that the pay-fors, the way it's paid for, is actually legitimate, not a bunch of gimmicks. You know, one of the things they recommend doing is essentially supersizing the IRS so they can raise about $100 billion from what they say are uncollected taxes. But there are a lot of Republicans, probably every Republican, who says there's no way we're going to support this first bipartisan bill if it is any way linked and connected to this much bigger, basically freight train heading towards socialism.
So Lindsey Graham said he's out. He's no longer voting yes. Are you no longer voting yes? Do we have a deal or do we not have a deal?
Well, I've talked to a number of members of the bipartisan group. They are all reluctant now to move forward. They're going to need more assurances from the president that there is no link, no connection between the bipartisan bill and this bill that the Democrats want to do. Really, they may end up trying to use, and I believe they will try to use, reconciliation on this $6 trillion bill. But look, that's going to be a high wire act for them with no safety net. There's not going to be a single Republican in the House or Senate who's going to vote for it. They're going to be left to try to get every Democrat in the Senate. They'll need every one, and they can only afford to lose 4 in the House to get this passed, which is a massive tax increase, including raising the death tax. Everyone will end up paying more if they do this, so it's going to be a long, hot summer for them.
Okay, so I want to take a short break, and I want to assess Biden's foreign policy with you as well. But I also want to ask you about the Democrats. Will he have all the Democrats in place to push this through reconciliation? We'll talk about that. Plus, why is Biden pushing for a meeting with Xi Jinping when we haven't even asked China about the COVID origins? China developing its nuclear and missile capabilities with zero transparency as well. All that right after this. We are back with Senator John Barrasso, the Senate Republican Conference chairman. And Senator, we're talking about the potential for an infrastructure deal, but Joe Biden wants to get the larger tax increase deal in there as well. Do you think he has the support of all Democrats? Will he be able to push this through reconciliation regardless of what the Republicans say?
Well, I think it's going to be a long, hard slog for them to try to increase taxes by this much on the American public for things that really would go way beyond what I would think is in the scope of government. There are so many liberal programs in here, very expensive. The whole green bad deal with the recyclable cafeteria trays. I think he's going to have a hard time doing it, and it's not going to happen quickly. But this gets to the difference between Republicans and Democrats and why it's so critical for us to, in 2022, take back the House and take back the Senate. And it's the role of government in our lives. You know, what does government do? What does it spend? And what does it take from us in terms of our time, our money, our freedom? And on every criteria, what the Democrats are trying to do here goes way beyond what government should be doing.
Well, we're looking at the spending plans for Joe Biden's budget, and it's pretty incredible. You know, Joe Biden has always said, and Nancy Pelosi has said, if you want to know someone's values, their priorities, look at their budget. And there is no increase in spending on Homeland Security. There is no increase in spending on defense spending. He's got a 1.6% increase in defense spending, but that would be negative when compared to inflation. And he's got a 22% increase to the EPA. A huge increase to education. Your thoughts on this budget? $6 trillion budget on year one.
Well, it shows by that definition of to know somebody's values, look at their budgets. Joe Biden, and hear me clearly, Joe Biden does not value our nation's security or our military, because the budget that he has applied to those two is even less than the rate of inflation. And he has massive increases in his budget for the EPA, for human services, all of those sorts of things. But at the same time, Maria, China is really ramping up its spending on the military. So what we're seeing here is with the president's priorities, he is making us, America, much more vulnerable to enemies from within as well as from without.
Yeah, we're going to talk about China coming up. We've got new information there. But also, I've been saying over and over, bad policy equals bad outcomes. And look at the crime spikes across our country. Earlier this week, I spoke with former NYPD Commissioner Ray Kelly about the crime spikes in our city. We've got a primary right now going on for New York mayor. Here's what he said about the leading contender, Eric Adams. Listen to this, because Eric Adams has been saying that crime and getting crime numbers down is his priority. Here's Ray Kelly, former commissioner of NYPD, on that. Watch.
He's saying something different than he said for the last 10 to 15 years. But we're going to have to wait and see. He obviously is the front runner. Talk is cheap in an election. Let's see if he lives up to his words. But he doesn't have that sort of record in the past as being supportive of the police or supportive of being tough on crime.
I thought that was real interesting about Eric Adams. Your thoughts on stopping the spikes in crime right now across our cities? Joe Biden came out this week and attacked gun ownership as a way to stomp out crime.
Well, what do the Democrats want to do? They want to defund the police. And what do Republicans want to do? We want to defend communities across the country. You know, I think about the victims of crime and the victims of violence, and there should be a right to safety on the streets. But this seems to be the golden age of crime in America. Murders are up, shootings are up. So that's what we need to deal with. And the president of the United States has his speech, and what does he talk about? He talks about guns. We are looking at record numbers of police officers who are retiring. It is making much harder for us to recruit officers, people to go into law enforcement. And according to the Democrats, you know, if a criminal shoots a police officer, it's the gun's fault. And if a police officer, to save someone else's life, shoots a criminal, it's the police officer's fault. This is an administration that has surrounded itself with defund the police advocates, starting with the vice president of the United States, but also we see it in the Attorney General's office and in the cabinet.
Yeah, I mean, Kamala Harris said on the campaign trail she wants to have no cash bail throughout the country, not just in New York. We know how that ended up in New York with these spikes in crime. Senator, it's good to see you this morning. Thanks very much for your perspective. We so appreciate it. We're going to take a break. When we come back,